Hi, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be taking a look at this enormous Hacker radiogram. Hacker made some fantastic equipment in the 50s, 60s, 70s, but I must admit in all the nearly 25 years I've been doing TV and radio repairs, I've never come across a Hacker radiogram. I've come across Hacker record players, all very good quality ones, Hacker radios, but this is the first radiogram. So it is huge. It's probably nearly 5 foot across. Lift the lid up, and there is a Garrard deck on the left-hand side. Well, a Garrard better quality deck. Nothing fantastic. It's not a transcription or anything, but it's perfectly usable and good for normal domestic use. And here is Hacker's radiogram sort of user interface. It's enormous. You know, it's very reminiscent of the Hacker radios of the time. These knobs will be familiar to those of you who know the Hacker sets. But you can see on here we've got unusual things like aerial antenna inside, so you can rotate it. It's got a rotator on it, so you can move the ferrite rod about. Also got lots of sort of rumble filters, scratch filters for the record. I did plug it in quickly on the unlimited supply on the Variac, and it did sort of start to work. There was just some usual sort of possibly noisy transistors. Switches are very noisy, but the amplifiers themselves will just want a little bit of work on, because I've just quick looked at some of the capacitors on there and they're looking a little bit tired. So we'll put those on the bench. You can have a look. As usual with most sort of high quality makes, it's relatively easy and nice to service these units, especially as we get towards the sort of transistor stuff that Hacker were building. As you can see, these are lovely little plug-in units, output transistors on the back, with a sort of multi plug arrangement on the front, sort of slide-on contacts on the edge of the PCB. These capacitors will replace for the service. Did just do a check on them, and they're a bit old and a bit tired, and the customer wants those replacing. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to run through the amplifier. You can see we've got various transistors in here. We're going to double check things to watch for. These little pots that they use for setting up the bias of the output transistors are notorious for going noisy and bad, so we'll just double check those. They may be what's causing a lot of the crackle at the moment, so we'll have a look at that. And you can see those in there. They really are notorious for causing problems. They sit in one position for such a long period of time that the carbon sort of gets very dirty. And it doesn't necessarily mean we can clean them. Unfortunately, we do have to replace normally, not just clean. For some reason, they just seem to give up the unequal struggle and they no longer want to work. But anyway, we'll replace those. So that's what I'm going to do this afternoon. It's Friday afternoon. Nice little Friday afternoon job before we go off and finish for the weekend. So I'm just going to recap these and we'll see where we are. Just a quick part of the video showing you the before and after. There's the advantage of doing stereo equipment. You get two amplifiers, especially on these Hacker units where you've got the pull-out modules. You can see this has now been recapped and cleaned. Luckily, those variables here, the little pots for the biasing, they are absolutely fine. So in static test days, we'll see what happens when we get some DC running through them, but I'm assuming they'll be fine. And you can see this one is still to be recapped and cleaned up. So it's nice to see the before and after. So that's both of the amplifier modules rebuilt, all nice and clean. We just date stamp the side there so we know what date they've been recapped and restored. So next job will be I'm going to leave these out for now. We'll go into the back of the receiver of the radiogram and now take the actual radio part out, and we'll go through that and clean the switches. Then again, I'm sure there's numerous electrolytics in there that we'll want doing. But if I just pause quickly, we'll go and have a look in the bag. Now in the back of the Hacker radiogram, we can see that there's the big mains transformer. I'll be checking that electrolytic as well from the power supply. It's a little bit dark in here, so I'll just go slowly in here and hope that the auto exposure works. It's very dusty, very dirty. So there's quite a few electrolytics in there that we will check, and probably will have to replace several of those. Looks like the FM decoder up there. As you can see, that it's smothered in sort of quite a thick grime, and this is all sort of given up to an equal struggle as well. I'll sort of pull away. So yeah, the next job is we're going to see. You can see it's quite easy. Bolts here, bolt there. and I'm assuming pretty much the whole chassis will then drop out, so I'll be able to get it on the bench and show you what we look at then. I've got the chassis out of the radiogram, and we can see it's modular, which is very typical of Hacker at this time. Quite clearly see now here's the main power supply, smooth in here, and fairly chunky considering this is a transistor radiogram, a good sized transformer there. There's some little preamps here for the phono stage. The actual radio chassis is down inside there, and there's obviously the tone control network along the front, with those rumble filters at the bottom. Just down here, in here you've got the little rumble filters. I've got to focus in there because of all the wiring. Obviously on the top here you've got the tuning capacitor, which is just here, and the VHF tuner. I'm hoping this is all right. These were sort of like sealed units, not really designed to be repaired by in-house. You know, it would have been sent back to Hacker. We weren't supposed to mend those, but obviously I can't send it back to Hacker now, so if there's anything wrong with it, we'll have to get in there and have a look. It's just caked in years and years of dust. I mean, it's thick with it. It's horrible. So first things first, I've got to go and give it a clean so I don't get absolutely filthy when I'm working on it. As I mentioned before, this looks like the FM decoder up here. So I'm going to give it a clean, get these preamps out. I can see there's one of these capacitors down here has popped and started to leak. It's gooey internals all over the place. So we'll check the capacitors on here. Radio side, we'll double check the caps on there as well. But they don't look quite so bad. I know you shouldn't go on looks, but you do get to know when you see these things. If you've got electrolyte oozing from the ends, or much like this one here, which is in the power supply, you can see there's a crack appearing in the end of it, which means obviously pressure's built up at some point where it's got hot. So you'll be able to see that will be replaced, because so we don't want it to go pop once we've gone the effort of restoring it. So I'm going to crack on with that, and we'll put it all back together shortly, and hopefully we'll be able to give you some sound from it. Here's one of the phono preamps, and we can see that on this end here you can clearly see that the electrolyte has started to come out of this capacitor, the 400 microfarad. So that will get replaced. We'll double check these other ones on here as well. I would imagine this has had quite a hard life. Not from the point of view of what it's doing, it's obviously I would imagine it's fairly close to tolerance. It's getting old as well, so it's just going to dry it out. And it's obviously got warm at some point and started to bubble and boil inside, and say it's spilled all its electrolyte all out of the end of the cap, which is unusual. On the other one, which is here, this one hasn't actually. You can see that where the crack that I was mentioning earlier on these capacitors forms. This one hasn't quite blown up to the point where the electrolyte is actually going to force itself out of the capacitor. But the chances are, if I was to use this for any period of time, it would end up looking like that one fairly quickly, where the what's probably left of the electrolyte inside bursts out of the can. So next job, going to replace these capacitors on here, and then we'll get them back in the main chassis. The original type of components or capacitors in this one had the wires coming out either end. The problem is they're not easy to get hold of now. You still get them, but they're not as readily available as this type, which have both leads coming out of one end. And to make a nice, neat, tidy job on this little preamp here, I've got this very small drill. I'm going to drill a small hole, so I can, rather than having to take the sort of long negative leads or leads of any description running across the top of the board like we would on here, I'm going to replace. But as you'll see, I'm going to now drill some little holes in here, with a small drill. So we'll just do one here. That's one hole there, and that'll allow me to then fit the capacitor. Rather than having to draw it all the way across there, I can now fit that capacitor in there like so, rather than having it sort of dragged across the rest of the deck, rest of the board. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to work out where I want the other ones drilled for the other capacitor, and we'll fit that in there. All the electrolytics have been replaced. They're all a bit dodgy, so they've all been done. You can see that it makes a nice neat job when you just drill those little holes. There's one I couldn't do. I had to trail a long lead across, but the rest of them have been drilled underneath. You never know. But now you have that one preamp board has now been recapped. So crack on with the next one. The radio receiver part of the gram is now been serviced. couple of dodgy transistors up this end. I've got some old, sort of new old stock replacements, germaniums for those, and that works fine in the AM stage. The VHF is fine, as I thought that probably would be okay, but that one's, luckily, that little box of tricks there is functioning as it should do, so it's just been realigned. We did have some problem, you can just notice in here, it's so small, you'll notice in here that there's some little sort of rubber bands poking out the top. That's because the original rubber bands they used to hold the IF slugs, the ones that sort of tune and try to focus on it for you, had gone, and they'd all gone back to powdery sort of, there's no elastic band left. So I just popped some new elastic bands and I just hold those, because obviously as we were aligning it I noticed it was jumping as the actual cores were slipping up and down inside the formers. So they've been replaced. It's all lined up, ready to go. So next job, get it reattached back to the chassis, and then we'll have a final test with the actual radio on the chassis itself. Right, so I'm going to do the tuner pit is now reconnected to the main amplifier chassis. As you can see, it's all back in there, ready to go. I just want to do a quick flick through on. This is the VHF. I was a bit careful on contact match, so just quickly sort of. 23.
I place you well above the Brontes. Thus encouraged, Pym wrote on.
Anything to do with like a planning dispute? We're not interested. Not interesting.
So we see that works really well. The gram section is working fine as well, so I tested the input on that. So the next job to do is to get this all back into the actual cabinet itself, and we'll test the actual internal speakers. This little label goes obviously in the back of the receiver, the radiogram. Just tells you where things get plugged in. And it's not essential, but it's just nice to have it back in as it were originally. But as you can see, it's dried up and it's really dirty. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to give it a wipe. Probably just use a little bit of alcohol to start with, just try and get some of this muck off. And then we'll stick it back in the back of the receiver. I've given it a wipe, it's got rid of the muck and the dust off the actual thing. It's not going to be perfect, but I needed just to stick it back in the back. Right, what I'm going to do now is going to give it an iron, just to flatten it out. I'm not going to put the iron directly on the paper. I'm going to put it under a little bit of kitchen paper, so I don't get heat directly on it. Just take a suitably vintage iron, of course, being here. 1970s row enter. Give a quick rub across, I'll go too mad. A quick go in the corners. Reasonably hot iron, nice and quick. Just on the bottom of an old towel. And hopefully, here we are. I think it might be a little bit more. It's just I'm going to turn it over and do the back as well. Run it back and forward. I could have stuck it straight in the back, but it's going to make it quite tricky to get in the back if it's not flat. So make a nice neat job of it first go. It's going to be easier if we iron it first. That looks a little better. I'm just going to give it one more go on this side. Across like so. Okay. So that looks a lot better. What I'm now going to do is I'll just quickly go and get some lacquer. And I'll just give it a really fine coat of lacquer. And that's that. Right, this is curled a little bit now, I put the lacquer on it, but it'll be nice and flat when we pop it in the back of the radiogram. So I'll go and get that stuck in. So the replacement, or the repair, whatever you call it, refurbished sticker is in the back again now, so you can clearly see where everything gets plugged in on the back of the set, which we're going to get, but we're obviously just going to plug everything in now. This is the wire that goes to the record player, the power. This is the FM aerial. And then we've got the two speaker wires that plug in here. So you've got right and left sockets under here, which is really quite tricky to do with one hand while you're holding the phone in the other one. Right, so that's the speakers plugged in. Mains goes on here. So next job, get the mains plugged in and we'll test the speakers. Right, so let's turn it on and see where we get on. On our switch here. Volume on this one.
At getdigitalradio.com. Love radio. Go digital.
This is the top 10 at 10.
It sounds absolutely fantastic, as I thought it would do for a hacker. The loudspeakers are superb.
Indeed, multiple losses, and for many,
Bass and treble.
all of
You
those,
obviously you guys can't hear quite how good it is coming through a little mobile phone microphone, but it really does sound amazing. So next thing to do is going to just test the gram, the record player side of it, and see how we get on with that. So let's get the gram going. Obviously I can't play many seconds of these songs because I'll get content match from YouTube, but it's quite loud. Forgive the crackly old records. Our test records have got fairly well played in here. Now that does sound absolutely wonderful. I'll turn the volume down just while I do a quick flick and see if we can get the next one. So there's not a massive amount wrong with the gram. I did notice that this is a bit sticky down here, the actual mechanism, but we'll do the standard service, which is we'll take the platter off and we'll get rid of all the old gungy grease around the centre spindle, and underneath also on the automatic mechanism there'll be lots of crunchy old grease and stuff under there. So we'll go on there and do that. So yeah, it sounds really nice. I thought it would do being a hacker. I wasn't expecting anything else. This would have been an absolute fortune when it was new, top of the range, the highest thing you could have bought. You know, British built hi-fi in a radiogram basically. So the last dying breaths of the British radio market, really. Hacker and Dynatron are producing some really lovely stuff into the 70s. Then again, these are the sort of the last time you were going to see radiograms. After this, it was separate speakers with a sort of, you know, the tabletop music center type thing. So this is one of the last radiograms that Hacker would have made. Anyway, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to strip the deck down, and then we'll get it all back together and give it one final test. So here's the final part of the video. It's all ready to go back to the customer. It's had a nice cleaner polish, not over the top, just enough to sort of bring it luster back. It's all back in the cabinet, as you can see. I'm going to play a little bit of music. I obviously can't play very much because of content match, but I thought I'd just like to sort of finish off the video. One thing you will notice that it was missing originally the Hacker badge on the front. I had one of those, so that's back on the front of that, so it just sort of finishes it off because there was a couple of holes there that were a little ugly before. Record in there, albeit quite a dusty one. Zooming around, and there is the amp and tuner all back in the cabinet. So if I just play a little bit of music, let's drop the arm down here. That's about all I dare do on that one. I can jump the track again and see if we can hear a little bit of something else. A little bit of Winnie Atwell. I mean, it really does sound fantastic. As I said earlier in the video, I knew it would, being Hacker. But it's been a nice one to work on this. Then again, testament to the Hacker engineers who designed it originally. Everything was modular, it was easy to take out, it was very easy to work on. Some radiograms, especially as we get towards the sort of later 60s and 70s, weren't very easy to work on, certainly weren't modular. You were lucky if you got plugs to sort of take the power supplies off and that sort of thing. Sometimes you have to sort of do quite a bit of unsoldering in the back of the set or cut the wires and then rejoin them later. So that's the end of the Hacker. This massive radiogram. I probably shan't see another for a long time because I say they're quite a rare beast. I'm sure. I bet many of these weren't sold at the time because I'd imagine they must have been extortionate. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video and I'll catch you on the next one.